Hi and welcome to my new .NET MAUI series. In this series I will build a .NET MAUI app from scratch. And in this series I will build an app based on the Spotify APIs. And the reason for that is that I wanted to have good real data to work with, so this will be more like a real world scenario. So my idea is to build an app called Playlist Builder, where we can search for artists, albums, songs, and we can create playlists. So let's get started and set up the project and build the first part. That I plan to be to acquire the token from Spotify that we can use for accessing their APIs. So what I don't will show in this is when I went to the Spotify developer dashboard and registered my account and my app, but that was pretty straightforward. So you can go to developer.spotify.com and do that yourself if you want to build something with the Spotify APIs. So let's get started and open Visual Studio. So here I have created a new project. I have used the default template called .NET MAUI blank app. So here we have the project called Playlist Builder, and we will start to create what we need for setting this up. So let's start and create the first views. And for that we need to have a views folder and a view models folder. So let's create them. Views. View models. Then we can remove the main page because we don't really need that one. And if we want the main page, we will call it main view because I will use the MVVM pattern. So delete that one and we create a new view and we call it login view because that is what we will do today, login. And we create a view model, login view model. And then I want to use the file scope namespace because I think that makes the classes more clean. And now we need to implement property change because that's something that you need in MVVM. So there are multiple ways to do that. You can do it yourself. You can use the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. And that is what we will do today. But we will also use my own helper library that is called TinyMvvm. And that has a dependency on the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. So let's go and install the TinyMvvm package. So we open the NuGet package manager. We search for TinyMvvm. And here it's important that we use the MAUI package that is called TinyMvvm.Maui. Seems like I have to add a package description here, but let's install that one. Okay. TinyMvvm has a view model base class that is called TinyViewModel, but often in many projects we want to add things to base view models. So we will add one in between. So let's go and create that one. So we call it view model. And this one can have TinyViewModel as its base class. Using TinyMvvm, fix the namespace here too. And now we want to have global usings because I said I want to have the classes and the files clean. So let's remove this one. And we can instead add them in the MAUI program file, for example, but we can also add this in whatever file you prefer. So let's add them here. We can make all usings global here. So, and now we don't need to have the using for TinyMvvm here, and we can make this class abstract because we don't want to initialize this one. Okay, so now we have the login view model, we have the login view. Now we can go to the IOC container and register both of them, because if we want to use them with IOC and we want, for example, the app shell to create them with IOC, we need to register them, both the view and the view model. You will see more of this soon. So services.add transient, it means that it will get a new instance every time we ask for it. So not main view, we remove that one, login view. And builder.services.add transient login view model. And now that was a few more usings added here, so let's do them global too. So, and now we can go to the login view and we remove content page as the base class because we want to use TinyView, but we will specify that in the SAML. So let's remove it for now. And now we can inject the login view model here. View model, just like that. We add it to field because I want to use that one later. And now we set binding context. Context to login view model, just like that. So, okay, let's go to the view. So now we need to import the namespace for TinyMvvm, just like this, TinyMvvm.Maui, and now we can use the base view model and mvvm : TinyView. And this is important for some of the features that you can use with TinyMvvm that you will see later in this series. So title, let's change that to login. And to make the bindings that we will use compiled, we use x::data type and set it to the view model. And that means that we need to import the view model namespace. So let's do that. VM view models. Let's see if you have help of IntelliSense. Yes, we have. So let's set VM dot login view model. Okay, now we're done with that. So now we can start to add some content here. So because we want to log into Spotify, we need to use their way to log in. And that means that we need to have a web view because we cannot use the APIs to log in. And that is a good thing because we don't want the users to input their credentials in our app and then pass them to Spotify. Okay, for us developers, that would be more simple. But from a user's perspective, it's more secure if they add the credentials directly to Spotify. So that's why we will open a web view inside of our app and use the Spotify login web. Okay, but first, let's create an image and a button that says login that will trigger the opening of the web view. So I have prepared with some images, but we need to add them to the project. So we go to resources, images, and then we go to add existing files. We'll add this singer to the project. We copy it to the directory. We go and make sure that build action is Maui image. Okay, now we can use that. And for this page, I will use a grid as the base layout because I want to have controls in different layers, and grid is good in that case because you can have multiple chais with grid and they can be on top of each other's. So we remove the label we add the image. Image source is singer.jpg, and we set aspect to aspect fill because we want to have the aspect, but we want to fill the whole page. So now we can add the button here. So button text login to Spotify, and we want to have it in the middle of the page. Vertical options center, horizontal options center. Okay, and now we also need a command so that we can handle what should happen when we press the button. So let's go to the login view model, and now we're using CommunityToolkit.Mvvm that has source generators. I have done a video only about that you go and check out if you want to. But to be able to use source generators, we need to make the class part_show. So let's do that. And now we need to create a command. And with source generators, with CommunityToolkit, we can just say that a method should be a relay command. Private void open login, and this will generate a command property that is called open login command when we add the attribute. So let's add the attribute. Relay command open login, add a method body like this, and then we can add a property that is called show login that we can use in the view to open up the web view. So let's create that property, and we'll do that with source generators through. So private bool show log in. It's important that this first letter is lowercase because the property name generated by the source generator will be with uppercase. So keep it with that. So then we go and add the observable property attribute. And now here we have an error because we don't have a base class that is an observable object, but that's because we don't have added our view model as the base class. So we do that. So, and the error is gone. So now we can see that we have a property generator, because if we write show here, we'll get a suggestion to use the property. And we should always set the property. If we set the field, it will not trigger a property changed. So show login is true. So now we can go to the view and we can say command binding and open login command. And now we will also get IntelliSense. And the reason for that is that we set data type to login view model. If we don't do that, the bindings will not be compiled and will not get IntelliSense. And we can also go and add those usings as global usings, because we will use them on more places. And now we got some errors because we removed usings, but that will be fixed by adding them here. And I prefer to group this usings a bit. So for example, we can have the usings that is for this project together. We can have all usings for CommunityToolkit.Mvvm together, and all usings for TinyMvvm together, because that will be a more structured way and find them. Okay, so now we can try to run this app to see if this view works. But to do that, we need to go to the shell and update that, because here we have a main page and we removed main page. So let's change that. So local is the namespace of the root of the project. So we need to change that. So we can call it views instead, and playlist builder.views, and views.login view should be our first view that are loaded, and we should not have home as title. Let's say login instead. Login, and route should be login page. Okay, let's see if we can run this, or if we have some other errors that we need to handle first. So we can try to run it on iPhone 14. Okay, so here we have the app. And what I think here is we don't need this navigation bar here, because we want the image to fill it up, and I think we should style the button a bit. So let's do that. So first we go to the login view, and here we can set shell.show shell.navbar is visible, set that to false. Let's see if hot reload works today too. Yes, it did. So now that is gone, and now we have some white area here, but that is because of safe area. We can remove that later. So let's go to the styles folder, and here we can see that we have a lot of colors set up, but I don't really like the way they have named the colors, because they have the colors in the name. I prefer to have it like primary is okay, because then we have a primary color, and then we have a secondary. But then we have a white and black, and primary brush is okay, and gray 100 brush. Now we should remove this and name them better, because we don't want to have the color names in the key of the color, because if we want to change color, that will be weird, and that means that we need to change them everywhere. So let's remove the colors and create new one. So we can call this primary color. That is pretty okay. But I think accent color is a better way, because then we can have an accent text color that matches this color for text. If we have primary and we have a primary color that is not maybe the primary color we use everywhere in the app, because that will be something that would be good for body text. This can be like everywhere where we use the accent color, and that will probably be used on buttons and stuff like that. So we create an accent text color too, and that one can be white, like that. And when I'm working with colors, and I'm not a good designer that knows good colors that fit together, but there are good tools for that. For example, we can go to colors.adobe.com and use the color wheel. So if we have one accent color that we want to use, we can just enter that one in here. So let's take this one, for example. We add it here, and we will have a lot of colors that fits good together. Or we can go and explore, and they can help us with color palettes. So I already found one that I liked, so let's go and take that color. And that one is this green color. It's not Spotify green, but I think it's a nice way to have a green color, because Spotify is green, but it's not exactly the same. That makes our app a bit unique anyway, but it doesn't really matter, because we'll not publish this app to the app stores. But yeah, it's fun to make something looking good. So styles. Here we have some default styles specified by Microsoft. Yeah, and they are pretty good, but they're using this gray 950 and stuff like that everywhere. So let's go and remove them and start over with styles. So let's create a style for the button. So style, target type, button. And here, if we want to add this style just to specific buttons, we can add a key to it. But here I want them to be on all the buttons. So then we can add a setter, property, background color, value, and here we use the accent color, static resource, accent color. And we also add a setter for the text color. Value, static resource, accent text color. Just like that. And now we can restart the app and see how it looks now. Yeah, looks better and more unique than the default colors. Okay, so let's go and add the web view to the login page. And my idea is we will add that, and when we press the button, it will animate it up. So in the grid, we create a web view is visible, set that one to false, and then we will change that to visible when the button is clicked. But we also want to give it a name that we can use from the code behind. So we call it login web, like that. So, and we also want to wrap this in a frame, and the reason for that is we want some round, nice corners on top of it. So let's do that. And we can give that one a name too, so we can use that also from the code behind. Just call that login. Set is visible to false, that we don't need that there. We can have it on the frame instead. False. Corner radius 10. Border color. Let's set that one to black. We should put that in a style later. And then we don't want any padding right now. And this one has a default padding of around 20, I think. So, okay, now we are done with the UI. We can make the code a bit nicer. So now we can go to the code behind. So when we have this property changed in the view model, then we want to run some animation code. And that animation code I prefer to have in the code behind. So we need to wire us up to the property change event. So let's do that, and we should do that in the on appearing method and in the on disappearing method we should unsubscribe to the event. So login view model dot property changed plus is equal to, and we create a method to that, but we put that method in the end like that, and then we should unsubscribe when we leave the page, just like that. So, and now we are ready to write some animation code here. So let's go and do that. So now we have a property changed handle method. So let's check that this is the property that we want to use. So property name is equal to login view, no, is equal to name of. I always use name of wherever I can because it's better than hard coding strings, because you will get an error if you write something wrong. So login view model dot show login, just like that. So first we need to set a source to the web view, and that source should be like this, with a client IDs and redirect URLs and some state for Spotify. So let's go and create that constant class, because we should break things like this out to a constant class or another class, because we maybe want to reuse them on other places in the app. So constants, make this file scope here too. We make the class static because we don't need to initialize this. So then we add the constants, so the client ID and client secret that we got from the Spotify developer dashboard. Don't worry, I will regenerate this secret before I publish the video. And the redirect URL, it doesn't really matter what you put here, but we need to have one so we can be able to detect when the WebView are navigating to it, but you will see that soon. So we can go back here to login view, sample.cs, and now we don't have any errors, and we have the source set. So now it's time to start the actual animation. So let's say login doc translation is equal to height, because we want to hide this view first so we can animate it up. And when we have done that, we can set it to visible, because it will not be visible anyway, because it's below the screen. So, and now we can do a translation. So login.translate to, and that required another namespace. So we add that one to the global usings too, like that. Okay, translate to, and then we will add an X value and an Y value. So X will be the same, so we just use login.x, and then we will set 100 here as the I value, and that because we don't want it to go and cover the whole page. We will have 100 pixels in the top left. And then we can set an easing to easing.bounce in, bounce out, cubic in. I prefer linear, but you have other options if you prefer that. Okay, now we can go and see if this works. So let's start the iPhone simulator again. Oh, what I forgot here is to set this state field. And state is just something that we can set if we want to. So we can see when we get a callback that we have the same state string as we sent to the login page. That's just a security thing. So we can add a private read-only field that we can use here. So we can use the same state for the whole life cycle of this view, and we can just use a GUID. New GUID.toString, just like that. So now we have the state field, and now we maybe are able to run the simulator. So let's try and press the login to Spotify button. Yeah, and now we have it opened here. So now we can continue here to, for example, with Google, because I created my Spotify account with Google. Oops. We're not authorized to do this because of an invalid user agent or disallowed user agent. And the reason for that is that the WebView will not have a user agent by default. And right now we cannot easily add that to the WebView. But I have seen there are a pull request in the .NET MAUI repository that will add a property called user agent here. But one good thing with that is that I get a chance to show you how handlers works. So we can add them, for example, at the top of the file in the constructor. So we add Microsoft.Maui.handlers.WebView handler, then .mapper, because handler is something that maps MAUI controls to the native control. And we want to append to the mapping. We will give the mapping a key, can be more or less whatever we want, but say user agent. And then we have an action passed into here. So handler WebView. Let's add that to a new line. And here we can add the actual content. So for Android, we want to access the Android native WebView. So we add an if with conditional compiles. So we compile this different on between iOS and Android. So, and if. So now we can see that we have .NET 7 Android as target project. So let's start with that. So then we can say handler dot platform view, and here we can see that we access the Android WebKit.WebView control. And that one has a settings property. Settings property, and for that one we can set user agent string, and here we can set that one. So let's create a variable so we can reuse it. And here I tried with different options. I tried the default one for Chrome, for example, but that did not work. Then I got another error when trying to log into Spotify. But if I just wrote Chrome here, like this, it worked. So let's go with that. User agent. And for iOS, we will do a similar thing. So let's say .NET 7 iOS up there, and we can get IntelliSense for that instead. So we set platform view and custom user agent is user agent. So, and now we have added this to all our web views. And we can try again and run the app. So log into Spotify. Here we have it. Continue with Google. I will add my credentials. So now I have entered my credentials, and the only thing we need to do is to accept that this app can log into Spotify. So let's press accept there. But nothing happens, and that because we are not listening to the navigation of the web view yet. So let's go and add that. So we can add that one here too, so we can subscribe to it in on appearing and unsubscribe in on disappearing. And so login web.navigating. We don't want to have navigated because we want this to happen directly, something changed. So navigating plus, create a method for that one. We move that to the end of the file. And then we unsubscribe from the event here. Just like that. So what we need to do now is to listen to our web view and detect if we have the redirect URL in it. So let's add an if statement to check that. Just like this. If this not contains redirect URI in the string, and it contains this actual value of the redirect URI. And the reason I add this is because we don't want it to catch this the first time when we set this URL containing the redirect URI. So we will only run this code in the correct step of the authorization. So now we should parse that query string to get a code from Spotify. And I prepared that code because that is pretty boring to look on when I'm writing. So now we have a code and we have a return state. And now we can check that this state matches what we sent to Spotify. So we can do that if return state is equal to state and we got a value in the code, because this code is something that we will use to get an access token that we can use for the API. So is null or white space is not null or white space, so like that. And now we can animate this login view away. Login dot translate to x is still the same, so login.x, but here we set this to height again as we did in the beginning here. So then we set easing should be easing.linear here too, and we can set login dot is visible to false after that this has completed. And that also means that we should have an await here, because otherwise this will happen directly. So let's add the async keyword there. So, and now we need to handle this code, and that is something that we should do in a service that we will call from the view model. So let's go and create a Spotify service. Add new class, Spotify service, because it's good to have interfaces for everything to make things more testable, even if we will not write any test in this episode. Interface, and here we can add a method, return a task of bool. So if it succeeds, we return true, otherwise false. We can call it initialize, because it will initialize the Spotify services for us. And then we put string auth code here, and auth code is the code that we get back from the login parts. So we should of course put that in a separate folder, because that makes things more nice, services, and more structured, I should say. So, and then we can align the namespace with that too. So, and now we go and create the actual implementation. So Spotify service, implement Spotify service interface, remove this throw exception stuff. And now when we do this, we should call the Spotify API with a basic authentication header. So we first need to generate the value for that, and that will be a base64 string based on Spotify client ID and client secret. And we will do that like this. So encoding.utf-auto get bytes and pass the string Spotify client : Spotify client secret, and convert to base64 string and pass the bytes there. So now we have that. Now we need an HTTP client with that header. So create that one. Hot client is new one. Later we maybe want to reuse the HTTP client, but not in this case, because this is the only time we have this header. And they also want the content to be form encoded. So we create that content like this, form URL encoded content, and we have a key value pair here. So we have the auth code, we have the redirect URI, and the grant type. And that is authorization code. That means the code that we got from them. So now we can post that to Spotify. And we do that like this. Client.post async and put the URL accountspotify.com API/token. So, and we need an async keyword up there. So, and now we should have response that hopefully are successful, but we will check that. So we will get JSON back. So from the response, we read the content. And even if this is not successful, it's always good to read the content, because in a debug scenario, this is good to check if there are some message in the content property that tells us why things went wrong. So then we have JSON. Then we need to deserialize it. And then for that, we need a model. So let's go and create a models folder. Models. And we create an auth result class. Auth result like that. And this one can be a record, and it should have two properties, access token and refresh token. And that is something that we can use to access the APIs. And refresh token is something that we will use to get the new access token when the access token not are valid anymore. So now we have that one, we can go back to the service and we can deserialize it. And we put that in a result variable. So we use JSON serializer and the deserialize method. Say that we want to be auth result. And then we put the JSON to it. And now we can create a field for this service that is access token. And that means that we can save it here so long that this class is alive. In a later episode, we maybe will save it to the secure storage. So access token is equal to result.access token, and then we return response dot is success status code. So now we have completed the service, and now we want to register to the IOC container so we can inject it into our view model. So let's do that. Builder.services.add singleton, because we want that one to live the whole lifetime of the application. So Spotify service, and should map that to Spotify service. And when I say map, I mean that when we ask for a Spotify service, it will resolve it to a Spotify service class. So, and then we have the usings here for that added. So we make that one global too. So we don't need to add a new using in the view model. So let's go to the view model, and we can inject iSpotify service here and add it to a field that I don't want to have there. I want to have it in the top above the constructor. So this is usually how I structure my view models. Private fields on top, and not all private fields, because those ones that are generated by the source generator I will have below the constructor, because I see them more like properties. But after the fields we have the constructor, then properties, and then commands, and after that I have other methods if I added some. For example, we need to do that now because we want a method to handle the auth code that we can call from the code behind. So public async task handle auth code string auth code, and now we can call the Spotify service. Wait, Spotify service dot initialize auth code. So the last thing we need to do now is to go to the code behind here, and we call that method and pass the code variable. So we don't want the view to wait for that, so we add a task dot run to run that asynchronously, and we will add async there. Then we can do await login view model dot handle auth code and pass the code. And now we have a warning here, but we can fix that easily, but add a discard like this. Okay, now we are ready to run this and see if we can get an access code to Spotify APIs. So let's set the breakpoint here in the Spotify service. So there, for example, and then we go and run the app. So we press the login to Spotify button, and now it remembers my credentials in the browser. So the only thing I need to do is to press accept here, and this is Swedish for accept. So we can go and set the breakpoint here too, to see that we will go in there. So accept. So we need to do some scrolling there to make that work. So, and now we can debug this, and we can see the URL is this long one with our redirect URL here and a code in the query strings that we can use. So we step this through. Well, let's see if we have the same state. B4E, start with B4E, both of them. So they are probably the same. So, okay, let's let the debugger go. Yeah, now we are here. So we are ready to do our post to the API. So let's step forward. You get JSON back. We got an access token here, and we have a successful status code. That's great. And it also closed the WebView. So what we have done today is that we have started to build a Spotify playlist builder, and we have added a login view, and we have retrieved an access token for the API that we can use in the coming episode. And I think this is a perfect place to end the first episode. So if you like this and want to see more of it, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, because I will create more episodes when I continue to build this app, and I will also create other type of videos where I build .NET and .NET MAUI stuff. So see you next time. Bye bye.